everyone. This is Liz from the Barletta team at Ligris, and I am super excited to have with me today Mr. Hudson Santana, the president and CEO of Santana Team in Boston, Miami, and in Portugal now, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, and tell me a little bit about sort of how you're seeing the market, maybe after you introduce a little bit about yourself.
Hold on. So you want me to tell you about myself? All right. I don't know. What would you like to know? I've been doing this.
How you got started. Your history is super cool. I mean, when you
Yeah.
came to this country and sort of what you've built is pretty astounding.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I moved to the US when I was a couple weeks before I turned 17. I grew up in the Amazon in Brazil, a state called Rondônia, right on the border of Brazil and Bolivia. So, got to Boston from Brazil, started in the restaurant industry, and then in 2009 got my real estate license, and it was a life-changing experience. My wife, which at the time we were dating, she's the one that kind of got me into real estate. She was a pretty successful realtor, and then we joined forces, and we're here now. So we like to help investors, families, a lot of developers in the Boston area. And I currently live in Coconut Grove in Miami, and I primarily still work in Boston, so I kind of go back and forth a lot and do a lot of these Zoom calls and Zoom meetings with clients and stuff. So
it's awesome.
I also run a real estate development company called North America Development, which does a lot of projects in the Cambridge, Somerville, Arlington area in Boston.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we've known each other for a while, and it's funny, we have I'm from Miami originally, I have a lot of Miami history, which is cool. And it's just awesome to see sort of what's been built, because when I also moved to the Boston area, I knew nobody. Like, it was just kind of developing on your own, and now you have a team, and they are wonderful people. Like, I have blessed to be able to work with you guys. And in this market specifically, because I think a lot of people are sort of curious, is the NAR stuff affecting the market? Are the rates affecting the market? Like, how is the Boston market particularly feeling, just normal resales?
Well, one thing I will touch, though, is saying now you have a team. Our team has actually been open for 13 years now, which like we started a team when teams weren't really a thing. Right. When we still push back. Now everybody has a team, everything, even people that don't have a team say that they have a team. So it's been pretty cool to see that we passed that 10-year mark and like understanding how to run a business and that transition. As far as the NAR thing, funny enough, last week I gave an interview to NPR and I talked about it. I think that, I really don't think anything is going to change as far as being a realtor. The difference is there's more accountability. You just have to do your job.
Yeah.
I think the easier part is that now it's the law. Like before, like on our team, we always had buyers sign a buyer agency agreement.
Yeah.
Now the law says they have to.
Right.
So in my view, it's actually easier because I can say, Mr. Buyer, I actually don't want you to sign this thing, but it's the law. So I just have to follow the law. I didn't create the law. Now, my example is, when the police officer stops you because you're not wearing a seatbelt, he doesn't have to explain to you why you should wear a seatbelt. He's just like, hey, the law says you need to wear a seatbelt. Then wear a seatbelt.
Yeah. It's true.
As simple as that.
For all the agents, including all your team members, it doesn't feel any different. I think for those who have never had that conversation with sellers, and actually, like you said, to your point, it's going to be an easier conversation than you guys used to have before when it wasn't commonplace.
Yeah, because before I had to convince people why we did it and why most other people didn't do it, where now, if they tell me somebody else said they don't need to sign, well, somebody else is breaking the law.
Right.
If you're willing to make the biggest purchase of your life with somebody that clearly doesn't have any regards for the law, knock yourself out.
Exactly.
That's not who I am. That's not the type, that's not how I run my business. Right. So I think that's that. And I do think it requires more work. But again, if you're established, right, again, it's going to weed out a lot of the amateurs. and
Agreed.
it's gonna keep the professionals are actually, in my opinion, are gonna do better.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, it is what it is. You can
Right.
sit and
And we can't do
complain.
anything about it anyway.
Yeah, you can cry and complain, but it's just, this is what it is, and we have
Yeah.
to follow it. So
Agreed.
I will say, on the consumer side, I think my fear for the consumers are that there's a lot of media out there, kind of putting a negative tone on realtors, and I think it's going to skew people from wanting representation.
Mhm.
And that's where I think a lot of people are going to get burned,
Yeah.
because you think you might be saving money by not having a buyer agent, but in reality, you're probably going to pay more for the house, or you're going to buy a lemon,
Right.
that has issues, that, because again, the only person that gained from doing dual agency is the realtor.
Right.
It's not the seller or the buyer. It's more like this agent gets to make more money.
Right.
Is it really, the best thing for the consumer? Probably not. But if they choose to do it,
Exactly.
on our team, we either represent one party or the other. We don't get in the middle. And if we can choose to work with an unrepresented buyer, but it's very clear that, like, hey, I represent this client.
You're on your own.
If you don't want to be represented, no problem. But so.
Got it. And then for just the market in general, how this is affected, or how like the rates have trickled down kind of up, people are kind of on the fence, maybe waiting. What do you feel is happening?
So I just saw some really, really interesting data yesterday from Keller Williams, but it's all public data, and really showing how back into the home sales data, and you guys can Google, or I can send it to you. Maybe you can edit it.
I can link it, yeah.
But basically, the kind of scary, interesting thing that's happening is that we're really following the trend of 2007, 2008, as far as like the number of sales and how it dropped. And again, I'll send you that slide for you to see.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see next year, because as far as this year and last year, it's exactly like 2007, 2008. Wow. So yeah, as far as like how we basically had a huge boom of transactions, and now the transactions really slowed down. It's when you look at Florida, and since we're talking Massachusetts, Florida, what happened here is there was a huge push because of COVID for people to move here. That push is over, right? Nobody has any urgency, right? People still want to move here, which is great, and I encourage it. But I don't think anybody has that urgency anymore.
Right.
Which, again, prices have climbed tremendously here, and now we have a lot of sellers that thought that their house was worth so much money, and these houses are on the market and they're sitting there. Yeah. And you see these prices dropping. Right. Is it scary? I don't think so. I'll give you a perfect example. Where I live right here, there's 3 houses on the market. One house that was purchased the same time I purchased my house. It's a beautiful house. She's actually a real estate attorney.
Oh, cool.
She bought her house for $2.4 million in 2019. The house is listed it started at $6.3 million. Wow. Right? So you look at 2.4 to 6.3, which honestly, I don't think it's crazy knowing the area and stuff. Yeah. Well, now they already dropped it 300 grand, right? So the problem is when the consumer or somebody that's not really educated in real estate sees that there's a $300,000 price reduction, they freak out and think the market is bad. Yeah. Well, that number doesn't, it's just a made up number, right? In my opinion. So I would be scared if that house all of a sudden drops to 3 million and it's still not selling, right? Because if you look at 2019 to now, I would expect a 4% appreciation like year over year, right? So it should be trading, assuming we have a stable market, at least around 3.5, 4 million bucks, right? Which is not the case. And again, we're talking, it's still listed at 6 million. Will probably sell for like somewhere in the 5.5 million range, right? So again, the market is still good. It's just people are very unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
The other problem with the Florida market that's very different than Boston and people don't understand is that in Boston, I don't have a single client that wants to test the market. All my clients put their house for sale because they need to sell.
Right.
They got a new job, they need a bigger house, they're getting divorced, whatever it is. But it's not like, you know what, let's see what we get.
Right.
Here, a lot of people have
That's so true.
second, third, fourth homes that they're like, hey, if somebody wants to pay me $1 million more, I'll sell it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to believe the data here. Like it really is hard because it's like you see these crazy prices and you see these crazy reductions, but the reductions really don't mean anything.
That's so, and it's true. I mean, it never gets to that point in Boston. It just is such a different market.
Yeah. So I'm actually very optimistic in regards to Boston because I do a lot of investment stuff. And I think that, again, people talk about the shortage of inventory. I got my license in 2009.
Yeah.
The big conversation was there's no inventory. We've never had inventory as far as, at least for as long as I've been in real estate. So to me, you know, I think we're gonna be fine because again, there's a lot of demand because we have a lot of great industries in Boston, right? Like there is people that are still getting paid really well. Again, very different from Florida. I think the challenge with Florida, and I'll give you a good example. I was in Boston for the summer and I met an investor in an open house, and he's like, "Oh, that's cool that you live in Miami. I actually want to sell my portfolio in Medford and I want to move to Miami." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, you know, I want to get out of New England, blah, blah." I'm like, "Yeah, let me explain to you why that's not a very good idea." And again, this is my opinion. You are in an area in Boston, right, where you can buy a multifamily and you have a high demand of rents because of the universities. And yeah, it could go up and down a little bit, but historically it goes up.
Yeah.
And yes, there's regulations that are not as favorable for landlords. But if you buy assuming a multifamily, let's say Medford, what this guy owns, you can buy today a multifamily in Medford between $1 million and $1.2 million. That multifamily between $1 million and $1.2 million, what do you think, Liz, you're an experience of this, what do you think the insurance is going to be for a two-family in Medford?
Oh, 3,000, 3,500.
Exactly.
Yeah.
3,500, maybe 5 if it's like terrible, right? Terrible condition. Again, assuming 4,000. What is the taxes what are the taxes going to be on a two-family in Medford? Probably 8,000. Right. So taxes and insurance throughout the whole year, you're going to be paying about $1,000 a month, right?
Very fair.
You know, 8 plus 4, $12,000 a month. If you bought $1 million property, a multifamily, which I own a couple here in a really good area in Coconut Grove, if you buy the same multifamily, two-family in Miami, the taxes are going to be 2% of your purchase price. So if I buy again, $1 million times 2%, it's 20,000. Right?
And they haven't heard the insurance yet.
Now, that same property that I would pay 4,000 in Boston, in Florida, I'm going to pay at least 12,000. Right?
Not more. It's
or more.
Yeah.
But so okay, so we just went from 12,000 for taxes and insurance, where here I'll probably pay 12,000 just for insurance, and then the taxes are so much higher, which means now I'm looking at 32,000 just in taxes and insurance. We didn't even talk about interest rates. Right. And then you could argue, well, but Florida doesn't have income tax. Well, if you own real estate, you're going to pay taxes on the real estate, right? So if my property, let's say, okay, I pay income tax in Massachusetts because I bought a two-family in Medford, right? And that income is generated in Massachusetts. So whatever profit I make, I have to pay taxes in Massachusetts. Well, the beauty of real estate is that anything that I spend, let's say I buy this property and then I spend 20 grand to redo the roof, this and that, I can offset that by the income.
Right.
I can depreciate them, right? Long story short, that state income tax is really not that impactful,
Right.
on my project or house, right? The the property taxes here, you can't avoid it.
Right.
There's no like, oh, I'm gonna write it off. No, you're paying
That's what it is.
regardless, or they will take your house away.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
so point being is that I used to, when I moved here, I bought a bunch of properties here because I was like, my goal was like, hey, I'm going to stop buying Massachusetts and buying here. Now I went back, but here's the one kicker that most people don't know. Liz, do you own any rental properties in Boston at all?
In Boston, no.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
But when you have a rental property in Boston and you have to rent it, right? Let's say it became vacant. Who pays the realtor?
Oh, to rent it, the tenants do.
The tenants.
Oh, yeah.
What do the tenants pay?
Usually like a month's rent.
Month's rent.
Yeah.
So now, if I'm a landlord and I'm renting a property, and let's say, before my tenant move out, I'm already lining up another tenant.
Mhm.
Am I losing a month's rent? No.
Mhm.
Now in Florida, who pays the realtor?
That's the homeowner.
The landlord.
Mhm.
So now, on top of taxes and insurance, you
Mhm.
also lose a month's rent for,
Mhm.
and every time you're trading a tenant. And you could argue, oh, I'm gonna do it myself. That's a whole other conversation.
Right. Right.
But here's the other thing for people to learn. And I say this by being a landlord and
Sure.
dealing with this. When I have a property that there's no attrition on me increasing my rent, meaning like, hey, I can ask for a rent increase because if my tenant moves out, there's no immediate penalty.
Right.
Meaning like, if my tenant moves out and I find another tenant, as long as I find another tenant, I'm
You're
really not losing anything.
Right.
So I am encouraged. It's actually an incentive for me to raise rents every year, right?
Mhm.
In Florida, if I tell my tenant, hey, I'm gonna raise your rent, and they're like, you know what, I'm good, I'm moving out, I have an immediate penalty of 1
Right.
month's rent.
Right.
Right? Which, I mean, on top of the taxes, the insurance, I mean, do the math.
Yeah.
And see.
It's incredible. I mean, the misconceptions of real estate, I think, in Florida are huge. But at the same time, I love that, just to speak to your character, because you could have sold this whole portfolio in Medford, but you educated the client, and they're going to remember that.
I hope so.
Yeah, and eventually, if they decide to anyway, that's who I mean, it's.
Well,
Yeah, to
I
your
think
character.
like I think the way I view it is this. I only give advice on things that I do. And by the
Mhm.
way, advice is free, right? So, and it's free for a reason. You don't have to take it, but if you take it, there's no way for you to point the finger at me either, right? But I just think that it's important for people to understand.
Yeah.
I basically just proved to you the value of having a great professional on your side, right? Going back
100%.
to the whole representation conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like, somebody that wants to move to Florida and buy a place here and doesn't have a professional guiding them between Florida and Massachusetts, they would have no idea. They would just buy something blindly and hope that the market, right?
Yeah.
Where when they have the right person representing them, they get this kind of knowledge, and therefore they are able to make a better decision, whether they decide to buy or not.
For sure, for sure. And in the Boston market, are you seeing within the team like a big difference between home resales versus sort of some of your new construction projects for your own development company or others?
As far as what?
Just in terms of like days on the market, time on the market, like, is there a yearning for like the new construction and the patience for that, or are people, just going to the resales?
I think that's a really good question. One thing that I've been predicting, and it's happening, I mean, you and I might have had this conversation before, but our market has become more seasonal than ever. Period. And the reason is before there was so much incentive to own real estate. I mean, think about it. If you're buying a house at 3% interest,
Yeah.
it's like, I'm sorry, like if you're
Taking the
renting,
house away.
right? Like, I mean, there's so much incentive for you to buy on top of low rates and all the taxes and incentives and stuff like that, and the appreciation historically that we have
Right.
in Boston compared to other places in the country. So now, because basically those incentives went away by having rates upwards of around 7% now, right? Basically, what we're seeing is clients are only trading when they have to.
Right.
Like there's not really that buyer that's like, oh, this is a good deal, I'm just gonna buy it. No,
Right.
they really have to think about.
Right.
And also our market's always driven by a lot of investors, and the investors also have to think twice before buying, because most properties right now are not really cash flowing.
Right.
So basically this is really what we're seeing. So my recommendation is really, you have to really time it properly. Meaning like, hey, like right now, now, it's the best time for buyers. Like if you're a buyer and you're ready and pre-approved, you should be throwing offers left and right, because the houses that miss the spring, they're just sitting there.
Right.
And because of that, there's a chance that you're going to come across a seller that's going to be, tight,
willing to take something lower. Yeah.
That's basically what we're seeing. But as far as, I mean, we're projected to actually have an even better year this year than last year. So properties have been selling pretty well. We have seen a lot higher price points than the year before. But I think the good news for Boston, in my opinion, is that, I mean, there's all these talks about lowering rates. So I really think we're going to have a very, very strong spring market next year. We already had a strong spring market this year, as far as the houses that were actually for sale, they sold, right? And with rates, hopefully, I was actually talking to Shant about this. I believe that if rates hit less than 6%, even if it's 5.9 or 5.75, I think that would be like the sweet spot where sellers would really be willing to trade. Meaning like, hey, I know I have 3% mortgage on my current house, but I really want a better house or a bigger house, or I really want to move. I'm not so caught up on the rate. Which right now, if I'm selling my house and I have a 3% mortgage, to get into another house at 7%.
Right. It's so true. And that's really, I think, the key factor as to why the inventory is as it is. It's really those people who are having to, for like a job change or divorce, as you said, or anything like that. Whereas if things are closer to what they had purchased their first home at, or the most recent home, to be able to only lose a couple of percentages is huge.
But I will say this, as far as like a prediction, when people are fearful, right, you should be bullish, and when people are bullish, you should be fearful. I think a lot of people are fearful right now, and I think that the data already shows that we passed the top of the market. It really was like 2023, right before it started going up. That was like the peak. I think that the Boston market is so strong that I think this particular until October, I mean, I would be putting offers left and right. Or if somebody that's kind of on the sideline, I think this is the best time ever to buy, because soon, like, we're already off season, which means the house that didn't sell, they're most likely going to have to drop prices, which means you get a good deal, and rates are going to come down. So as soon as that happens, there's more transactions, and then prices go up.
And what do you think about the sort of scenario where I feel like I've encountered this recently in a couple transactions, where our sellers who are able to finance, they're buying their house at this maybe potentially better price, and then they're holding on to that original home until the spring? Do you think that that's something that makes sense, considering where we're going to see potentially with rate decreasing?
I mean, again, I think that the point that I was making, first of all, that's a very difficult decision to make.
I know, right?
Because you're just fearful, like, oh, I'm gonna sit on this house empty. But I can tell you that again, our market is very seasonal now.
Yeah.
And yes, if you can wait until the spring, you should. Or again, we always have a decent fall market right after, like mid-October to end of November. It's kind of like that sweet spot where, you know, I would list my house then, and if it doesn't sell, then I would wait until March, right? Like,
and
do you feel
that Florida has that same, considering the weather is kind of similar all year round?
I don't think Florida is like that. No, I think Florida is very different. It's like the timing here is different. I mean, but it's also very neighborhood specific.
So true.
You know, like where I live, which you didn't say this, but I think one of the things that we have in common is that my daughter goes to the school that you went to high school at. Which is, Carrollton.
The best girl, Carrollton.
Yeah. So, like this neighborhood here is very heavy in regards to schools. So that's kind of similar to Boston, but then a lot of the other areas aren't. Right. So it's a little different. I think here the big problem is the insurance. Insurance is very scary right now.
I still remember when I was buying my first home, and my best friend from Miami was buying her first home, like right off of Calle Ocho, and very up and coming area now. But so she was like taking a gamble, and she was telling me how her insurance was going to be $7,000 and mine was going to be like $1,500. I thought she was lying. And this was years ago. It's amazing.
I think the difference here is that, and I mean, we could have a whole conversation about how to invest and stuff, but look, you're looking at an area where there's a lot more highly priced homes. So like, I like to joke, like when you see a $15 million house in Boston, it usually is on the globe, right? Like so I mean, like my street alone, there's like 3 $30+ million homes. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many here. So I think the difference here is that you are like, your potential of appreciation, if you're able to hold on to it and you wait for the right market, is absurd. Like, and that's really the difference, because Miami is it's probably one of the biggest international markets in the world. Where Boston really isn't. Like I like to joke, like I don't know a single person that had a dream of living in Boston. Like, do you? I mean, I know people that
I did. I was like, oh my God, Boston from Miami.
No, but your dream
I understand.
It was probably to go to school in Boston.
Yes, exactly.
It wasn't like, oh, my dream is to live in Boston, right? Like again, it's great to live in Boston, but I'm just saying, like, people go to Boston because of work, because of school,
100%,
because they grew up there, right? Like that's all they know. Miami is like, any wealthy person in the world wants to own a property.
Everyone knows Miami. Everyone
or wants to send their kids to live here, or like that's just what it is. So it's a very different market. And then again, you have to understand world economy. Like, how is Brazil doing? How is Venezuela doing? How is Russia doing? You know, because a lot of the times when those countries are not doing well, their wealthy residents are sending their money here and buying properties on Collins Ave and so on and so forth. No, it's so in the Association of Realtors, where I've sat on meetings and stuff, the meetings in the Florida associations, the conversations are so different than they are in the Mass Association of Realtor events, because it is very heavily focused on whose are your connections in other countries and what's happening there to bring them there. It is so interesting. Yeah, it is. So. Well, Hudson, I don't want to take up all of your time, but I appreciate you very much for hopping on today, talking about the state of things. And thank you so much. We're going to link your information. So if anybody has any questions for Hudson, please reach out to him. And thanks so much. And by the way, if anybody challenges my thoughts, I would love to have Oh, maybe we can do a follow-up video on that. No, again, I'd love to be challenged, and maybe I will learn something from it too. So that is one of the things that you always I appreciate of you and your personality, is you're always wanting to learn. So whenever we have our conversations, like, what are you seeing? What is this? You always are wanting to learn. So again, thank you so much. No problem. All right. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll talk to you soon. Talk to you soon. Bye.